Hello, my name is Janice B. Gordon. This is Scale Your Sales podcast. Welcome to the Scale Your Sales podcast, listed number 9 of 42 best podcasts for every sales professional in 2021. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert, recommended by LinkedIn as one of 15 innovative sales influencers to follow in 2021. In today's episode, my guest talks about personal profile as a key asset to growing your business or growing your relationships with your customers, or even attracting customers to you, and how critically important this is. He is the founder of the Key Person of Influence method, which takes you through 5 key steps in order to build your business and build your brand. As founder of Dent Global and Scoreapp, my next guest is Entrepreneur of the Year 2022 and 4 times best-selling author. He is a leading authority in scaling businesses. His reputation and extensive experience with his own companies has seen him advising for Inc. 500 leaders and unicorn entrepreneurs, as well as appearing regularly in the media. Welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast, Daniel Priestley.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I've known you for years and years with the Key Person of Influence method that you introduced and launched into the UK, and the great events that you did there. So the method is perfect pitch, publish, product ecosystem, raise your profile, and partnership, and something that we can all learn from. There's something I'd like to ask you about how your company, Dent, has adapted in the post-pandemic era. What you said is that we're spending much less time looking backwards, that we're now in a better position. So can you explain more about that? Because I think it will help other organizations that are listening here.
Yeah, so for us, it was a shock, like it was for every business out there, that suddenly the economy was in lockdown. No one had ever heard the word lockdown before. I had no idea what the word furlough meant. So all of these things were brand new. Going into the pandemic, we used to run physical events every single week, multiple events every week. So setting up venues and banners and seats and croissant and coffee, all of those things. And then next thing you know, it's like, no, we can't do any of those things anymore. So we had to make some quick changes. We instantaneously put everyone on furlough that we could, that was eligible, and we brought people back one by one as we thought we needed them. We just didn't know how things were going to pan out, so we just kind of said, let's start with a wholesale action so that it's fair on every single person. And we very rapidly moved online, and we discovered that people were actually very comfortable online. We went from running full-day workshops, which if you're going to get people to come to London and attend an event, you better, run a full-day workshop. We discovered that a format of about 2.5-hour workshops is really what people much prefer, because they get an idea, a strategy, then they go away and implement, and then they come back. So rather than doing one full-day workshop with a client per month, we'd do 2.5-hour workshops on Zoom. Suddenly we were getting better results with our clients. They weren't getting overwhelmed. They weren't feeling, full mentally. And we loved it. We loved seeing how much better that worked. Our team loved it. And we were able to strip out costs that had no impact on clients. So things like our own personal offices, which are very expensive, we just didn't need those anymore. And that goes straight back into our budgets, which we then hired a team of coaches to do one-to-one coaching or small group coaching on our program. So the money that we were spending on venues and offices and event managers, we actually moved that across to coaches, trainers, more resources for the actual customer-facing impact stuff. The social element, we found great ways to just do the social element on its own. So People love to, connect with each other. So we found ways to get them connected. During the, lockdowns, we got them connected online, but now we're actually running social events near Liverpool Street with our clients, where the whole purpose is just, turn up and network and connect. So essentially we've morphed into a very different business, a business we're more happy with, a more profitable business, a more successful business for the clients, and it looks different, very different to what it looked like in 2019, which is a great thing. Other big change is we went from a city model to a time zone model. So rather than thinking about our business as London, Birmingham, Manchester, Singapore, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Tampa, Florida, Toronto, we just now think about the business as EMEA, Asia Pacific, and Americas. So 3 time zones. We've basically got our team organized time zone teams, and away we go.
Well, that's quite a radical change. And it's interesting you say that, we're looking forward, that everything's in a better position with the business. So I would imagine for the companies that you support in their growth aspirations, that the lesson here is out of adversity can come real opportunities.
Yeah. What choice do you have, right? So you get thrown a curveball. You either step up to the plate and hit it, or I don't know why I'm using a baseball metaphor. I don't even understand baseball, so I don't even know what a curveball is. But it sounds like one of those things. But you either step up to the plate and hit it, or you strike out. Apparently, not that I would know.
All right. So, for B2B sellers, there are now barriers that have been removed and lifted away. So it's quite difficult for B2B buyers to be buyer-centric and customer-centric with the digital world evolving. So tell me more about that.
We've gone from a world that's very much based on geography to a world that's digital. And what that does is it puts us in competition with all of our competitors globally. It also puts us in competition with every single message that somebody wants to put into somebody's ears. So we find ourselves in this strange situation of trying to get cut through in an incredibly noisy market. In markets where there's geographical limitations, what we see is what's called a standard bell curve distribution, where businesses tend to fall into this bell curve. As soon as the barriers are lifted and you go into digital, you end up with what's called a power law distribution, which is known as the 80-20 law or the Pareto law, which means a small number earn all the money, and there's a very long tail of people not making very much money at all. And that's because a small number of people are able to get cut through with their message, and most people are lost in the noise. So it's incredibly difficult. And unfortunately, every industry right now is going from the bell curve distribution to the power law distribution, the Pareto distribution. And you've got to be really, the rewards have never been greater if you get it right, and the punishment has never been worse if you're average.
So what would you say to companies? How do they find that sweet spot, that 20% that really cuts through the noise? Because there is so much out there, and we're encouraged to put so much more content in. What are the key things that companies need to do to kind of hit that mark? 2
things. The first one is personal branding. So we want to connect with people who appear to have a good personal brand online. So for example, when we're going to have a meeting with somebody, we typically have a look at their LinkedIn profile, we might have a look at their Twitter account, we might Google their name, see what comes up. So that first test, I always use this phraseology of you are who Google says you are. So, if I Google you and, it says that you're a amateur polo player in, Florida, it's like, oh, okay, that's confusing. I didn't realize, So we go on Google and we have a look, and either we're going to be confused, or we're going to see nothing and we're going to be disappointed, or we're going to see a really good profile where I can say, oh, wow, you've worked on a project with, this great brand, and you've done this thing and you won this award, and, there's some credibility there. I can see that you're active and that you're positive. I might look at a Twitter account. In fact, this has happened. I've looked at Twitter accounts where people have been like really negative online, and they're complaining about things and all this sort of thing. And I think to myself, oh, okay, I'm not sure this is going to be a positive meeting. So that first one is about personal brand, passing the Google test, and just having good quality assets that communicate your personal brand. And I think that's more important than the company brand at the moment. So, you might have these big letters, PwC or KPMG or something like that behind you, but ultimately people meet with people. And if I, meet with a person who looks positive online and looks like a good personal brand online, then I'm excited for the meeting. So that's part one. The second part is the collection of data and personalization. So essentially, when we meet with people now, if they can in any way demonstrate that they have collected data and personalized their approach, the impact of that is much higher conversions. So if we talk to people as a general homogenous group of people out there in the market, and it's like, oh yeah, all of you in the market who have exactly the same needs and wants and tastes and desires, if we're talking to a market like that, then we basically don't resonate with anyone. If we're trying to please everyone, we resonate with no one. If we can in some way talk to an individual and say, hey, Billy, I looked at your Twitter account and I saw that you're interested in such and such. I'd love to connect because we can actually help you with that. Or you filled in one of our online surveys, or you filled in one of our online scorecards, and I saw that you scored a 42%, but that's under indexing based on where you want to be. You want to be over a 70%. Can we talk about how to get you from a 42 to a 72? And those kind of ways of conversing with people, whether it be digitally or in a meeting, they create massive amounts of cut through. So essentially, if you combine two things, if you combine personal brand with the ability to collect data and personalize your message, you're really in for a home run. By the way, Janice, I just did another baseball thing. I said a home run. What is going on with I'm not even American.
The universe is telling you something. I'm not sure what it is, but maybe by the end of this interview, we'll work it out.
I must have America on my brain or something that I'm using these baseball metaphors.
You're working in so many different time zones.
I'm stuck in the Americas time zone.
We're talking about personalization. When someone listens to this, they may actually send you the key things you need to know about baseball.
About baseball. Yeah. How to translate baseball metaphors to cricket if you're on the yeah.
So I was going to ask you, there's a lot of sales leaders that struggle with personal branding. They get it, but actually, how do they transfer that? They think social media, it's time consuming. I'm not going to get any payback from this. So it's best that I don't do it. So they're really kind of teetering around the edges and not kind of throwing themselves into really investing in their personal brand. It's something that's quite foreign to them. They can't see the end result. What would you say to them?
I'd say that's great. It makes it easier for the rest of us. Stay on the sidelines, be quiet, and let the rest of us get on with doing all this business. I'm being cheeky, of course. The idea here is that I used to hear the same sort of sentiment when it came to networking. People would say, "Oh, I don't understand networking," and then you go out networking, especially if it's good quality networking, and suddenly you realize, oh wow, this pays the bills. This is the thing that gets the most cut through and the most deals coming through. Essentially, especially if you're B2B, all the networking is now happening on Twitter and LinkedIn and all of those places, and even Instagram is incredible networking. And those little side conversations that happen in the direct messages are the kind of like, there's the main networking hall of the platform, and then there's having direct messages with people and being able to target your conversation based on what you see and learn about people. There's a few different levels to having a personal brand. I think the basic one that everyone probably can agree on is that you should pass the Google test. If someone Googles you, you should look like a good quality person to meet, and there shouldn't be anything that detracts from there. So you want to avoid, like things like not having a profile picture where people can't, sort of see who you are, or not having any real content or information that just doesn't give people the information they need in order to connect with you online. So that would be kind of the basic level. And then, as you move up the levels, you want to add followers. You want to have at least 1,000 to 10,000 followers on your main channels. Then producing content, posting some content, making sure that people can connect with your ideas, and doing some thought leadership content, getting the follower count up even higher. And some of those, so essentially we want to move up those levels. Once we get to the top levels, we're sharing platforms. So we're connecting with people who also have a big audience, big platform, and we're actually joint venturing, partnering, and multiplying our networks, and basically creating opportunities for other people who've also got a great network of people. So ideally, you can pick your level. You can say, okay, I'm happy with the base level of just passing the Google test, or you can say, you know what, I want to really go all the way here. I want to, get to the point where I can do joint ventures and partnerships, and I can be on other people's platforms, and I can have a platform that other people want to join me on, and go right to the top level.
You're the mega key person of influence. So how do you manage your team, I would imagine, continue to manage your own key profile on your networks? What's the kind of shortcut method that you use?
So I do have an amazing team, and also I'm quite passionate in the sense that I use the tools. So, for example, I am producing content. There's time in my diary where I prioritize writing an article, or scheduling 20 or 30 tweets to go out, or those sorts of things. There is just time that I put into doing that kind of work. About every year or two, I rebook a session with a photographer and do updated headshots. And all of those sorts of things. I treat personal brand as an asset, and if I owned a £1 million house, I would want to make sure that it's kept well, and that everything's functioning, and that if something breaks, that it's very rapidly fixed. Because once you see it as an asset, then you really make sure that it's a well-kept asset. So for me personally, I have it in my mind that I'm definitely producing an asset, growing an asset, protecting an asset. And that kind of then spawns all the other behaviors of having assistants and having people who help. The unfortunate thing is when someone's just looking to tick a box, and it's like, oh, I need to tick a box, so I'm just going to get a junior assistant to tweet some random stuff. And that's never going to work, right? There's no thought behind it. There's no energy behind it. There's no care and attention. And clearly that behavior comes from not really seeing profile as an asset. So the first step is to, if you have any doubts whatsoever that having personal brand is an asset, then the first step is rectify that. You need to go and do some homework and realize this is one of the greatest assets that you have. And it's one of the assets that all the millionaires and billionaires across the world talk about. Warren Buffett, who invests in companies, says that his brand and his reputation is his greatest asset. It's not the Apple shares. Everything comes from his brand and reputation.
And I've seen you grow up on social media, bid on, bid off, and mature. And it's interesting to actually track people, that kind of legacy that you're leaving behind, and longevity in the investment. I mean, it's building on one year after another after another. You want to see that footprint that they've been around, and there's a history to the messaging that as it evolves and changes and we grow in maturity.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because some people jump around a little too much. They don't take people on a journey with them. So for example, I've got this company Dent, which most people know me for, and the key person of influence. But during the pandemic, we launched a new business called Scoreapp. And I had to make sure that people understood why I was going on that journey, why essentially, we had the training and development on key person of influence and the accelerator programs. But we also had developed a software tool that would help people, and that it was completely aligned with my broader vision of developing entrepreneurs who stand out, scale up, and make a positive impact in the world. And it was just one of the tools that I was bringing to the party for that central idea, that central mission of developing entrepreneurs to stand out, scale up, make a positive impact. And I was conscious of the fact that a lot of people would probably go, oh, wait a second, what, have you stopped Dent? Are you stopping doing those things? Like, what's the story? You're doing something different. So I was conscious to try and make sure that the people who'd known me for a long time understood the evolution of the thinking, and I could do what's called a pivot, where you're essentially, pivoting something from your existing thing. You're actually adding something that supports that. But people understand that this isn't a deviation. This is just a continuation of a broader message.
And actually, you're living your own product, key person of influence, and productizing your ecosystem. This is part of the same thing, but it's just, one aspect of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's it. I've laid the foundations of letting people know you should have a product ecosystem around you.
So explain more about the online quiz, the influence scorecard. And what I don't quite understand is the Scoreapp. Is the one part of the other? Did one come first, and how did it all evolve?
I'll tell you how it evolved. When I was single and a childless bachelor, I used to travel around the world speaking at conferences. And that was the best way for a bachelor with no kids to do business, right? Because, you're on planes and you go into hotels and speaking at conferences. And that was fabulous at that phase of life. But once I met my wife and we started a family, there was no way I could live like that. So around 2014-15, we developed something called the Key Person of Influence Scorecard, an online quiz that people could take where they would discover their Key Person of Influence score, and they would get a personalized report as to how they could improve their influence. So people would answer 40 questions, and then that would produce a PDF report that gave custom recommendations to people. And people loved this. About 80 to 90,000 people took the scorecard, and tens of millions of dollars worth of sales came in off the back of it. And our sales team absolutely loved this, because when someone fills in 40 questions, we can really see, oh, wow, this person's got a really strong pitch. They've got a great published content. They're lacking in products. They're lacking in profile, and they're not doing joint ventures and partnerships. So we can zero in and say, your pitch is strong and your published content is strong. We need one or two more products here. We need to get some other people promoting those products. So within about 3 minutes of conversation, we're able to customize and tailor our approach and our presentation to them, and really connect with the thing that they need most. Now, contrast that. If I was speaking at a conference and someone gave a business card and said, I'd love to connect or something like that, I give that to my sales team. And then the sales team ring them and they have a conversation that goes like this. Tell us a bit about yourself. Tell me, all I've got is your business card. Tell me, what do you do? How do you do it? Who do you? So there's like 30 or 40 questions that people get asked that add no value to them. And they get sick of that real fast. And they say, look, I'm busy. I don't have time to talk right now. So let's make another time to talk. So salespeople hate it and prospects hate it. When someone's filled in the scorecard, you jump straight to the good bit. So here, based on how you answered, here's what I think we should talk about. And people love that. It's like, oh, cool. This is very personalized. So in 2019, some of my clients said, can I get one of those scorecard things? Can you help me with that? And we started doing them for about 10 different companies, and we're sort of just checking it out and sort of playing with the idea of taking what we'd learned from that process and putting it into some other businesses. And it just worked across the whole 10 companies we worked with. All of them got a similar result where they got thousands of people filling in scorecards. One got 100,000 plus people. One of our clients won a huge corporate contract off the back of a scorecard. So they didn't get a high volume, but they got the right people filling in the scorecard, and it led to a big piece of work. So then we realized we could build a platform to allow thousands or tens of thousands of small businesses to have a scorecard. So we now have currently 2,000 companies using Scoreapp. Scoreapp is the platform, like Instagram is a platform to put in photos. Scoreapp is a platform for putting online scorecards, assessments, quizzes, tests. And a scorecard is a little bit different to a survey. Some people hear scorecard and they think it's like a survey. So a survey is, I ask you lots of questions, and then at the end I say, thank you, thanks for doing that. We'll get back to you. A scorecard's a bit different. It basically asks lots of questions and then immediately gives people value. So it gives them a result, it gives them custom recommendations. So think about something like, are you ready to run the London Marathon? And you ask a series of questions, and then at the end it says, you're 42% ready, and here's why. You scored high for having all the equipment and the kit. You scored low for weekly training routines. You scored low for having a training partner. These are the recommendations that we think you should do to run the successful London Marathon. Something like that. And all of that data is then in the engine and produces a report, and it happens immediately for the person doing it. So that's how a scorecard's different to a survey. But essentially what's wild is everyone's like getting the best quality leads their business has ever seen. B2B leads, B2C leads, like whatever they've launched, the consistent feedback that we get is this is the best quality lead generation we've ever had. So it's lovely to see that.
It's wonderful. I saw you do a presentation on this, and you know, so easy to use. So you have different levels where you have, I think, subscription based, do it yourself, or talk to me about the different levels.
Oh, so we wanted to make it really cheap because when we built ours, it was about £8,000 to £12,000 all in, to build something that produced those PDF reports and all of that sort of stuff. And it was a lot of effort to write the questions and come up with the scoring logic and all of that sort of stuff. And then when we worked with those clients, we were still charging £8,000 to £12,000 per client to set them up and get them built. So what we wanted to do is template it so that you essentially edit a template, and then we just wanted to make it super affordable. So for small businesses that don't need many leads to be very successful, £29 a month. For bigger businesses, £89 a month. But those are businesses that generate thousands of leads. And then for agencies that want to actually do this on behalf of multiple clients, it's $189 a month. So we kept it, you know, subscription-based, affordable, all of those sorts of things. And also, we internally have a department that can build scorecards for companies, and we actually have some agency partners who can build scorecards. So if you're a big company that wants someone else to do it, write it, produce it, all of those kind of things, we actually work with FTSE 100 companies at the moment to help them to implement this, and we've got agencies that just do that for them.
I think it's really interesting the way that companies are evolving, in that service-based companies now are productizing their offering, or having that as an avenue, and product-based companies are actually servitizing. Don't you find that really interesting in the way that companies are developing their offering? Why do you think that is?
Well, there tends to be three offerings, which is do it yourself, which tends to be a tool, and most people don't use a tool correctly all on their own. So, you know, my guitars sitting behind me, unless I pick them up and play them, they're a fabulous tool, but someone's got to pick them up and play them. And then there's done for you, where someone comes along and says, we'll just do all this for you. And then there's done with you, which is the more productized service. And it seems to be that the market tends to like productized services. And the reason for that, I think, is because technology has typically evolved to a point now where people are actually comfortable with a well-designed portal to do some things themselves, or with a well-designed tool to do some things themselves. But they want to know that if they need support, then they can, you know, get support just on a few key issues or a few key things. So people who are down the tools end have kind of come up to the middle point. And people who are down the, we just do everything for you, but we're really expensive, have realized actually we probably need to meet in the middle here as well. So the productized service is really taking off for that reason. It's a great midpoint pricing wise as well, where the customer's not overpaying for complete delivery, and they're not underpaying but not getting a result.
So what does the near future look like for Dent?
Yeah, well, I mean, what's interesting is that when I launched Dent and launched the Key Person of Influence Accelerator, people thought this was a radical, big kind of cutting edge step. And what's actually happened is that people now see it as an essential, and they feel the pain of slipping behind if they're slipping behind on this. So what we're discovering is that, because we've been doing it for 12 years, we've become a preferred supplier to some big corporates. We've got really high quality people coming through. We've got a lot of, medical professionals and, people from the professions, accounting, legal. We've got amazing award-winning architects and, all sorts of really phenomenal, amazing, talented people are now coming in, and they're seeing the value of working with us on their personal brand. But the big difference has been we used to have to sell this as a radical idea that you should be an early adopter for, and now people are just recognizing, I just need to do this, and I've heard you guys are good at what you do. So it's a different business, but it's nice.
Yeah, excellent. So, Daniel, if you were on a desert island on your own, what would be the one thing you took with you?
Well, I thought about this, and hopefully it's a nice island, and hopefully we do have a plane coming and pick us up eventually. But I thought if, I've got 3 young kids, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and 7-year-old. So if my wife and I got a moment of just the 2 of us on a beach with some scuba equipment or some snorkels or something like that, that would be a very, very nice weekend. Just the 2 of us. So I've chosen my wife, and I've chosen some scuba diving equipment, which would be fun.
I think you might have to wear the scuba diving equipment because it's one thing. So you're going to have that on you with the tank and everything.
We're both just going to be sitting on the beach with these tanks on our backs, and snorkels and things, trying to have a conversation. All right, maybe I haven't thought this through as well as I could have.
But think about it, you've got an oxygen tank, so you're going to be able to make fire, because you've got fuel for that as well.
Oh, is this a survival situation? Okay, in this case, I'm taking Bear Grylls, and I'm taking a survival kit. If that's, in my mind, there was a seaplane coming at a scheduled time, and we're going to get picked up at a later date. So
I can see you were going with, this is my ideal holiday. This is what I really want. It's a deserted island, Daniel.
I was projecting onto the scenario what I wanted to see.
Okay, Daniel, how can listeners get hold of you?
Well, of course, connect on social media, LinkedIn or Instagram or any of those places. I've got books that are on Amazon, and I've got a new book coming out called Scorecard Marketing to explain to people exactly how to get a successful scorecard campaign up and running. So keep an eye out for the new book, Scorecard Marketing. And and actually, if you contact us through social media, I'll send you a link to be able to get a free copy, an advanced review copy. So message me on Twitter or on LinkedIn, and I'll sort that out.
Excellent. Anything like that, I can put in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
So. Okay. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast, Daniel Priestley.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast. If you like this discussion, feel free to listen to other episodes or watch the captioned show on YouTube and subscribe to future episodes. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you.